Chapter 1631. By his calculations, his lifespan would be extended by at least 30 years if he were to stay and cultivate at Shrek Academy for the rest of his life. What could be more alluring than this? Through its will, the Tree of Life had told him that any member of his family would have the right to cultivate beside it once they reached the limit Douluo level. Why was it that Long Yeyu had dared to return to her youthful appearance? It was because she didn't have to worry about the life force that she had to expend to keep up this appearance. The Tree of Life had always been, and still remained the true core of Shrek Academy. This was why Yuan and Zenshin and the entire Yuan family had become extremely loyal to Shrek Academy. Back when Yuan and Zenshin had first decided to move the family, there had been many dissenting voices, but once they arrived and received the resources offered to them by Shrek Academy, all of those voices had turned into one of unanimous support for their family leader's wise decision. In this environment, the Yuan family was definitely heading toward a brighter future. After all, the Yuan family was currently the most powerful family of Shrek Academy. Yuan Yui was the future of their family, and she was already a member of the Sea Gods Pavilion. The fact that their family had two members in the Sea Gods Pavilion was sufficient testament to just how important they were to Shrek Academy. As a result, the Yuan family had already completely integrated itself into Shrek Academy, and both Long Yeyu and Yali had fully approved of this. Outstanding teachers were what Shrek Academy currently lacked the most, and there certainly weren't many hidden families that possessed two limit Douluo like the Yuan family. As such, it was truly a blessing for Shrek Academy to have been able to recruit them. In addition to those two limit Douluo, the Yuan family also possessed many titled Douluo, and they all had the exceptional Titan Giant Ape Martial Soul. As such, the Yuan family had truly become a pillar of Shrek Academy. Furthermore, even though the Yuan family was very powerful, it wasn't powerful enough to dominate Shrek Academy. Shrek Academy still had Long Yeyu and Yali, as well as the current Shrek 7 monsters, which were all developing rapidly, so they were still clearly superior to the Yuan family in terms of overall power. In addition to that, the fact that Yuan Yui was a member of both sides allowed them to establish a relationship of absolute trust, and that wasn't even taking into account the influence of Erming. Thus, the Yuan family was quickly accepted by the entire Shrek Academy. Aside from Yuan and Zenshin, who wasn't going to be actively teaching due to his age, even Yuan and Tiandang was currently a true teacher of Shrek Academy. Yuan and Tianchang was also teaching in the outer court, and after coming to Shrek Academy, he had gradually become a lot more extroverted and optimistic. Kaiyankyu Daiding's domineering aura had become slightly stagnant. Even though Shrek Academy was missing a person in this clash, the difficulty of securing victory only seemed to have increased. At their level, the most important skill to have was to be able to quickly assess situations and make decisions. What if someone were to be severely injured during this clash? Generally speaking, it was quite difficult for Limit Douluo to be injured, but it was an entirely different story if their opponents were also Limit Douluo. Furthermore, Shrek Academy and the Spirit Pagoda were sworn enemies, and it was clear from Long Yeyu's expression that she wasn't treating this as nothing more than a simple match. Kaiyankyu Daiding turned to Kaiyankyu Dongfang, and both of them could see their own hesitation mirrored in one another's eyes. If they were to surrender here, then their enrollment would definitely be impacted, and their plan to target Shrek Academy would also be completely foiled. Right at this moment, a thunderous dragon's roar rang out, and a beam of golden light instantly rose up into the air. Tang Wolin had returned in his suit of gold armor with his golden dragon spear in his hand. To Kaiyankyu Daiding's astonishment, not only did Tang Wolin appear to be completely uninjured, his aura had become even more powerful than before. How was this possible? He had clearly sensed that countless bones had been shattered in Tang Wolin's body. How had he managed to make a complete recovery so quickly? Tang Wolin rose up into the air in his dragon moon song battle armor, and his aura had spiked drastically. The golden blood dragon domain halo appeared beneath his feet, encompassing the 7 Shrek Academy representatives, and all of their auras began to rapidly elevate as well. Hold on. Kaiyankyu Dongfang suddenly yelled. Tang Wolin turned to him and asked, "Is there something you'd like to say, Chairman Kaiyankyu?" Kaiyankyu Dongfang arrived beside his father with a dark expression and replied, "I didn't think that Shrek Academy would have so many limit Douluo. With so many limit Douluos clashing at once, I'm concerned that spatial turbulence or elemental storms could arise, and that could impact the people down below, which is something I'm sure none of us want to see. How about we stop here for today, return our divine grade mecha, and we'll repair the rest of the mechas ourselves. What do you think, Sex Master Tang?" Tang Wolin raised an eyebrow and countered, "You came here to pick a fight. Now you're saying you don't want to fight. Why do we have to listen to you? I don't think spatial turbulence will arise, and our Shrek Academy's defense system is more than capable of handling elemental storms." Kaiyankyu Dongfang's expression darkened even further upon hearing this. "So you're determined to fight?" Tang Wolin smiled and replied, "Like I said, you're the one who picked the fight. The airspace of Shrek Academy is not to be encroached upon. This rule has existed for over 20,000 years. We've already done you a favor by sparing that man's life, yet you're asking for his divine grade mecha to be returned as well?" Kaiyankyu Dongfang was furious to hear this. The repair cost of the other mechas was still manageable, but a divine grade mecha was certainly not easy to replace. It couldn't compare with a suit of 4-word battle armor, but it was definitely far more precious than a suit of 3-word battle armor. The Mecha Pilot Association had turned up in support of the Spirit Pagoda, so the Spirit Pagoda would undoubtedly have to incur the cost of this divine grade mecha. Tang Wolin's return was like the final straw that broke the camel's back. With 5 limit Douluo on Shrek Academy's side, there was no way that the Spirit Pagoda would be able to secure victory in this 7-on-7 match. If they were to lose, not only would Spirit Academy be thoroughly embarrassed, the reputation of the Spirit Pagoda would also receive a heavy blow, and that was absolutely unacceptable to him. All right, we'll stop here for today. Farewell. Kaiyankyu Dongfang cupped his fist in a salute toward Tang Wolin, then immediately departed in a decisive manner. Kaiyankyu Daiding was the most powerful being among them, but Kaiyankyu Dongfang was still the current Spirit Pagoda chairman, and everyone immediately followed his instructions. A faint smile appeared on Tang Wolin's face as he looked on at the departing Spirit Pagoda entourage. It was over. The fight didn't happen. All of the journalists were completely rooted to the spot. They had just promoted this clash through all of their promotional avenues, yet it wasn't even going to take place now. The only noteworthy thing that had happened was that Tang Wolin had been slammed out of the sky by a staff strike. But now, the Spirit Pagoda was scurrying away with its tail between its legs, and it was even leaving behind the divine grade mecha. It was quite apparent to everyone that the Spirit Pagoda had conceded. They were at a clear disadvantage in terms of overall power, so they had chosen to retreat. While it was a testament to Kaiyankyu Dongfang's character that he wasn't influenced by the heat of the moment to engage in a battle they had no chance of winning, the fact of the matter was that the Spirit Pagoda had retreated. They hadn't verbally conceded, but this was really no different. What was even more astonishing to everyone was the power being displayed by Shrek Academy. The Academy had only recently commenced its rebuild, yet it already had 5 limit Douluo among its ranks. Furthermore, everyone knew that Shrek Academy and the Spirit Pagoda were sworn enemies, so why was it that Shrek Academy hadn't insisted on going ahead with this battle even though they clearly held the absolute advantage? Chapter 1632. There were many questions left unanswered, but all of the media outlets had received benefits from the Spirit Pagoda, so they couldn't openly denounce the Spirit Pagoda. After a brief silence, all of the hosts could only deliver an ambiguous conclusion to conceal the Spirit Pagoda's moral defeat. Those bastards. Kaiyankyu Daiding was furious as he flew back toward the Spirit Pagoda. Even though he was already an old man, his temper hadn't become any more mellow with age. A wry smile appeared on Kaiyankyu Dongfang's face. "I don't understand how Shrek Academy was able to recruit these 3 limit Douluo in such a short time. It's my fault for not detecting this sooner. I'll conduct an investigation right away." Kaiyankyu Daiding replied in an enraged voice. "What's the point? We've already completely embarrassed ourselves. The fact that Shrek Academy was able to recruit these people indicates that the rumors about Tang Wolin being a divine blacksmith are most likely true. We have to get rid of him as soon as possible. Otherwise, Shrek Academy will return to its former glory in no time." Shrek Academy's 5 limit Douluos piled immense pressure on the Spirit Pagoda, and they could no longer go ahead with their original plan of refusing to sell soul spirits to Shrek Academy as doing so could incur the wrath of the 5 limit Douluo. The Spirit Pagoda was the #1 association on the continent and possessed a vast wealth of resources, but even a superpower of this caliber couldn't withstand an attack from 5 limit Douluo. In the face of Shrek Academy's overwhelming power, they didn't dare to do anything, and that was what frustrated Kaiyankyu Daiding the most. Kaiyankyu Dongfang's brows were tightly furrowed as he said, "Don't be too concerned, father. I'll launch an investigation into the matter first. Our promotion has already achieved its intended effect, and we've enrolled more students than Shrek Academy has. That's the most important thing. We can continue to compete with them for students in the next few years, and I'm sure our Spirit Academy won't be inferior to Shrek Academy. Eventually, we'll be able to supersede them as the #1 academy on the continent." Kaiyankyu Daiding took a cold glance at him and said, "Find out who those 3 limit Douluos are first." After that, he quickly stormed away. Kaiyankyu Dongfang heaved an internal sigh. He knew that his father had to be very displeased with his performance. Kaiyankyu Kingfeng didn't even bother to say anything to his brother before he departed with his wife. His wife had been severely wounded, and he wasn't even able to avenge her, so he was even more displeased. Only Leng Yaoshu lingered beside Kaiangyu Dongfang and sighed. Tang Wuling really is a force to be reckoned with. Kaiangyu Dongfang turned to her and said, if Nana hadn't been in seclusion today, the outcome may have been different. Has Nana told you when she can progress to the limit Douluo level? Leng Yaoshu replied, that's not something that can be hurried. The fact that Nana has reached this level at such a young age has already far exceeded our expectations. Kaiangyu Dongfang sighed, I don't want to rush her, either. It's just that Nana is the only one in the younger generation capable of matching Tang Wuling. Thankfully what? Leng Yaoshu asked. Kaiangyu Dongfang smiled as he thought of that one piece of good news, and his mood was finally lifted slightly. Thankfully, Gu Yuna was already family. Otherwise, if she still had ties with Tang Wuling, that would be truly damning to the spirit Pagoda. Keep raising the benefits offered to the students. I'm sure we'll be able to enroll the best students as long as we're willing to offer sufficient benefits. Kaiangyu Dongfang instructed. Even though Spirit Academy had suffered a moral defeat during that clash, it still had to win the enrollment battle. The Shrek Academy camp landed on the ground, and Tang Wuling heaved an internal sigh of relief as he looked on at everyone's departing figures. Everything had gone according to plan. The reason he had chosen not to insist on that final 7-on-7 match was because Shrek Academy's rebuild had only recently commenced, and the defense system wasn't complete yet, so he didn't want to risk damaging the academy. Furthermore, he was concerned that if he were to back the Spirit Pagoda into a corner, they would do something drastic that would potentially risk the safety of the parents and students down below. Even though the battle hadn't gone ahead, the Spirit Pagoda had been forced into retreat, and the power of Shrek Academy was displayed for all to see, thereby bolstering the confidence of the registrants at Shrek Academy. The existence of the 5-limit Douluo had resolved many of the issues that had plagued Shrek Academy, and the power displayed by Shrek's 7 monsters was a clear testament to Shrek Academy's ability to produce powerful soul masters. This was a ploy that they had painstakingly prepared, and there wasn't even any need for them to say or do anything now. All of the parents were already rushing over with their children to register at Shrek Academy. Following this clash, the rebuilt Shrek Academy had truly re-established itself, and now, all that was left was the enrollment process. The future of the academy was going to hinge on the quality of the new students, particularly this first batch of students. Are you alright, Wuling? Yuan and Zenshin asked in a concerned manner. Tang Wuling smiled and replied, I'm fine. Having said that, Kaiangyu guiding really is incredibly powerful. That attack from him really did leave me in very bad condition. Yali turned to Yuan and Zenshin with a smile and said, rest assured, I'm his mother, and even I'm not worried, so he's definitely fine. She turned to Tang Wuling as she spoke, and the two of them exchanged a knowing smile. At this moment, the hideous middle-aged man also approached Tang Wuling before appraising him with a perplexed expression. How is this possible? I clearly sense that you had been severely injured back then. Your recovery abilities are insane. No, this is definitely not possible. Are you hiding some internal injuries? Tang Wuling shook his head with a wry smile. Don't worry, I'm fine. Tang Wuling had very mixed feelings about this man, and he wasn't included in the original plan, either. In fact, he had only arrived at Shrek Academy not long ago. Pavilion Master, there's someone here to see you. Tang Wuling had just completed his daily forging and was about to go and have some dinner, when Yang Nyangsha, who was now an outer-court teacher, suddenly approached him. Yang Nyangsha was once one of Shrek Academy's most outstanding students, and if it weren't for the current Shrek 7 monsters, Yang Nyangsha, Wisujuo, and the others would have definitely been the top students of this class. They had always been cultivating with Tang Wuling as their target, but Tang Wuling was simply progressing far too quickly, and the gap between them was only continuing to widen. The one with the most advanced cultivation rank among them was Wisujuo, who was already a soul Douluo, and Yang Nyangsha was at rank 79 soul power, only one step away from reaching the same level. At their age, they could already be considered to be exceptional cultivation prodigies, but just the mere thought of Tang Wuling would immediately dash their confidence. Shu Yicheng and Luo Bixing were also close to the soul Douluo level, while Zheng Yuan had come from behind to become a soul Douluo just a few days ago. Their class was all grown up now, and in the rebuilt Shrek Academy, all of them had become outer-court teachers out of necessity due to the lack of teaching staff. Chapter 1633. Someone's here to see me. Tang Wuling was rather perplexed to see this. It's a middle-aged man who looks to be in his 40s, and he's not all that great to look at. Yang Nyangsha replied with a peculiar expression. All right, thanks for informing me of that. Where is he right now? Tang Wuling asked. I took him to the conference room. There's something kind of off about him. I can't detect his exact cultivation rank. Yang Nyangsha said. Oh. Yang Nyangsha was already very close to the soul Douluo level, so for him to be unable to detect the visitor's cultivation rank indicated that there was a very good chance that this man was at least a titled Douluo. Who could it be? In any case, this was Shrek Academy, so he had nothing to worry about. Thus, Tang Wuling went to the conference room in the academy's main school building. As soon as caught sight of the man in the conference room, he was immediately rooted to the spot. Never did he think that it would be this man who had come to see him. Tongu, why are you here? The man sitting in the conference room had a layer of fine 5-colored scales all over his face, and Yang Nyangsha's description of his appearance had been very flattering. The man had already sensed Tang Wuling's arrival, and he stood up as soon as Tang Wuling entered the room. I had no choice but to come. I came here to ask you something. The man was none other than Kilin Douluo Tongu, whom Tang Wuling had faced in one of the matches of the Trial of 5 Gods. Never did Tang Wuling think that he would meet this man again. Tongu was looking rather exhausted, and this clearly wasn't normal for a limit Douluo like him. Please take a seat, and feel free to ask me anything you'd like. Tang Wuling hurriedly invited Tongu to take a seat before also sitting down himself. He was very curious about why Tongu had come to see him. Tongu was a limit Douluo with a tragic past, and in order to atone for his past sins, he had been willing to accumulate all of his power into a 5-elemental Kilin bead to be given to the victim's son. However, Tang Wuling had stopped him, while Yali had saved his life. Wasn't he supposed to be searching for the son of his past lover? Just as these thoughts were running through Tang Wuling's mind, Tongu asked him a question that completely rooted him to the spot. Is your father's name Tang Xiran? Tang Wuling immediately sat bolt upright upon hearing this, and a wary look appeared in his eyes. Why do you ask? A wry smile appeared on Tongu's face. I bear no ill will. I just want to know if your father's name is Tang Xiran. Tang Wuling's brows furrowed slightly as he replied, That's right. Tongu suddenly slapped a hand to his own forehead, and tears immediately welled up in his eyes. Why must fate be so cruel? Tang Wuling was rather perplexed to see this, but an astonishing thought then slowly occurred to him, and his eyes widened as he exclaimed, Surely not. Tongu turned to Tang Wuling with a complex expression, and said, I'm afraid so. Your father is the person I'm searching for. Tang Wuling immediately rose to his feet with incredulity in his eyes, and he stared blankly at Tongu, unsure of what to say. His father was the person Tongu was searching for. That would mean that his grandmother was Tongu's past lover. Memories of his childhood immediately began to surface in his mind, and he recalled that his father never seemed to have mentioned his grandparents, nor did he seem to have any relatives. His mother had been an orphan, so it was normal that he didn't have any relatives on his mother's side. But whenever he asked about his grandparents, his father would always turn as pale as a sheet, as if some type of traumatic memory had been triggered. So eventually, Tang Wuling didn't dare to ask anymore. Tang Wuling was at a complete loss for what to do. All of a sudden, Tongu had become the person who had murdered his grandmother in cold blood. However, he couldn't help but recall what Tongu had said back in the Douluo Empire. Who could be blamed for this tragedy? Who was at fault? Was it Tongu? Was it his grandmother? Or was it fate? The two of them stared at one another, and neither of them knew what to say. After a long while, Tongu sighed. Sect Master Tang, there's no need for you to feel troubled by this situation. I've been constantly searching, so I'm sure you can tell that I'm sincere in my quest for atonement. When I first arrived on the Douluo continent, I had no idea where to go. Finally, I discovered some leads and began to follow them, and I tracked down an academy that you had been to in the past. After that, I went to your former home, and I met a blacksmith there, who told me your name. Tang Wuling immediately became rather anxious upon hearing this. You didn't hurt him, did you? Tongu hurriedly replied, Of course not. However, I lied to him by telling him that I was a senior of Tang Xiran's, and that I was paying him a visit after many years. He told me that Tang Xiran and his wife had disappeared long ago, but you were at Shrek Academy and are the current Tang Sect Master. I could tell that he was very proud of you. He's my teacher, Tang Wuling said. Tongu sighed. You know about my past. Fate sure can be cruel. To think that this would all be over if I had just given my 5-elemental Kilin bead to you back then. I only have one wish. Please allow me to see Tang Xiran. I want to repent to him, and after that, he can do with me as he sees fit. Tang Wuling was still completely stunned by the situation. Tongu had clearly been very relieved to hear that his father was Tang Xiran, as if a massive weight had been lifted from his shoulders, but Tang Wuling wasn't very happy to see this. His first impression of Tongu was one of empathy, so even though it was his own grandmother who was the victim of this tragedy, he didn't really hate Tongu. My father has already passed away, Tang Wuling replied. He knew that Tang Xiran had most likely been resurrected in another world, but the fact of the matter was that he was completely unable to contact his foster father. How did he die? Was it because of me? Tongyo exclaimed. Tang Wuling replied, it had nothing to do with you. If he had passed away due to your actions, I wouldn't even exist right now. Both of my parents perished by the hands of the Holy Spirit cult's blood demon. Tongyo completely slumped back into his chair upon hearing this. He had been searching for so long, only to receive such a tragic answer, and his face had turned completely pale. How could he have passed away? I won't even have a chance to repent now. Why must fate be so cruel to me? Can't I even die on my own terms? Why can't I have an opportunity to atone for my crimes? Tang Wuling didn't know what to say. If Tongyo really had been a brazen criminal, then the decision would be simple. He would avenge his own grandmother at all costs. However, was Tongyo really at fault? Besides, Tongyo wanted nothing more than to die. He would most likely instantly take his own life if Tang Wuling told him to do so. And ironically, that placed Tang Wuling at a complete loss for what to do. Chapter 1634. Tongyo was also silent for a long while before speaking again. So be it, if I can't meet him, then meeting his son is the same thing. My life belongs to you. Perhaps my power won't be of any use to you, but I'll give it to you anyway, and you can do with it as you see fit. Tongyo raised a hand and prepared to strike at himself as he spoke. Wait. Tang Wuling hurriedly yelled. A wry smile appeared on Tongyo's face. There's no need to try and dissuade me. This is my final wish. I heard about what happened at the Douluo Empire after your departure. You're a hero who saved countless lives. If you think that my death will be a blemish on this academy, we can do this somewhere else. Tang Wuling took a deep breath to calm himself down, then said, don't be in such a hurry to die. Your actions have shown me your repentance is genuine. I can't comment on something that happened decades ago, but if you were to die like this, I would feel very uncomfortable. I can't say that I forgive you, but redemption is possible for anyone. How about this? My parents were killed by blood demon. If you can kill him and avenge my parents, then the differences between us will be settled. If my grandmother was still alive, I'm sure she'd prefer this arrangement as well. Tongyo folded slightly upon hearing this. You want me to avenge your parents? Tang Wuling nodded in response. That's right. Are you willing to do this? Tongyo sighed. You're her only living descendant. Even my life belongs to you, so I'm certainly not going to refuse. But aren't you letting me off the hook too easily? I've constantly been living in pain and remorse for the past few decades. Tang Wuling interjected. That's exactly why forcing you to live is the cruelest punishment for you. It's decided. You'll stay at Shrek Academy and aid us in our plight to destroy the Holy Spirit cult. There's no way you'll be able to track down Blood Demon on your own, but you'll get your chance when we clash with the Holy Spirit cult. Tongyo was silent for a moment before replying. All right, my life belongs to you, so you can take it anytime you want. After traveling for so long, I've become quite weary, so I'll do as you say. Thus, Tongyo was recruited into Shrek Academy by Tang Wuling, and just as he had promised, he did whatever Tang Wuling told him to do, and this included his participation in the clash against the Spirit Pagoda. Compared to when he had first arrived at Shrek Academy, the exhaustion on his face had already vanished. He was genuinely concerned for Tang Wuling as Tang Wuling was his psychological pillar. Why was it that Tang Wuling had been able to recover from such grievous injuries so quickly? Why was it that he dared to take an attack from a quasi-god head-on? This wasn't just a reckless act of idiocy. Instead, it was because he had the protection of an even more exceptional healer than Yali, the Tree of Life. As the son of nature, he had delivered a sufficient amount of life energy to the Tree of Life for it to flourish again, and in reciprocation, the Tree of Life had planted some type of special energy within Tang Wuling's body, allowing it to teleport Tang Wuling to its side at any time. The Tree of Life was the source of all life on the entire Douluo continent, and with its protection, Tang Wuling would struggle to die even if he wanted to. Unless the Tree of Life completely ran out of life energy again, it would be able to teleport Tang Wuling to its side and treat any injuries he had incurred as long as he was on the Douluo continent. As the Tang Sect Master and Sea God's Pavilion Master, he had massive responsibilities on his shoulders, so he certainly wasn't going to treat his own life lightly. That clash had been entirely under his control. Facing the full power strike of a quasi-god was an extremely valuable experience for a soul master of his caliber, and this experience was going to greatly benefit his future cultivation. The current Shrek Academy was changing for the better every single day. The constant replenishment of teaching staff and the precious alloys that Tang Wuling was forging on a daily basis were all elevating the new Shrek Academy bit by bit. Almost all of Tang Wuling's current cultivation was spent completing heavenly refinement, and he was only able to withstand so many elemental tribulations due to his physical constitution and his identity as the son of nature. Even so, these past few months had been extremely draining for him. Thankfully, he could heave a sigh of relief now that they had forced Spirit Academy into retreat. Of course, this still wasn't the end. Shrek Academy still hadn't secured the ultimate victory. Having said that, they had already stalled for this long, so the mission on the other end should have been close to completion. Yi Zichen was currently 11 years old, and there was still more than a month until his 12th birthday. Yi Zichen had grown up in a small rural town in the south, and his entire family was comprised of normal people. Before him, there had never been a single person in his family who had awakened a martial soul and soul power. However, by some miracle, he had awakened soul power alongside his martial soul, and it was innate full soul power. This event had shocked the entire town, and even the mayor had paid his family a visit, stating that the entire town would support him wholeheartedly in his future cultivation. At the time, the 6-year-old Yi Zichen had been rather confused, and he didn't even know what the point of cultivation was. All he knew was that there would be a glorious future waiting for him if he could become a powerful soul master. Thus, he was enrolled into an elementary soul master academy. His martial soul was very special. It was dust, and it was an earth attribute martial soul. In the beginning, even the teachers at the academy didn't know which direction he should strive toward with his cultivation. Yi Zichen's family wasn't very wealthy, and the elementary academy he had attended was far from exceptional. It was under these circumstances that he began his own cultivation. In the eyes of his family and everyone in the town, his innate full soul power would surely at least allow him to become a mega pilot in the future. As long as he was willing to work hard, he would definitely be the pride of the town. However, Yi Zichen's aptitude had far exceeded their expectations. His innate full soul power granted him the highest possible starting point among all soul masters of the same age. While everyone was still working hard to reach rank 10 in soul power, he had already obtained his first soul spirit. The soul spirit had been sponsored by the town, and the entire town had run a massive fundraiser in order to purchase this 100-year-old soul spirit from the Spirit Pagoda. With this soul spirit, Yi Zichen experienced the wonders of the soul master world for the very first time, and he truly began his cultivation journey. In the short span of just 3 years, he had progressed from rank 10 to rank 20 in soul power. This was an astonishing rate of progress that was very difficult to achieve even with innate full soul power. With his 100-year-old soul spirit, he was able to immediately obtain a second soul ring and become a soul grandmaster. His incredible rate of progress had stunned his academy, and even though the education standard there was quite average, they had the foresight to know that they couldn't weigh this child down no matter what. Thus, he was sent to another elementary academy in the largest city in the south, and with his brilliant aptitude, he received a full scholarship. Everything had gone very smoothly for him up to this point, and he was currently on the cusp of turning 12. Coincidentally, Spirit Academy had recently begun advertising their enrollment day. This was undoubtedly going to be one of the best academies on the continent, and what attracted Yi Zichen the most was the range of benefits that Spirit Pagoda was offering. Those benefits were simply far too alluring, particularly for those who hailed from humble backgrounds. He was currently at rank 29 soul power, and he was one step away from rank 30. If he could study at Spirit Pagoda, he would be able to easily obtain a second soul spirit. Thus, following a discussion between his teachers and family, it was decided that he would enroll at Spirit Academy. He was very confident in himself as he had always been the best in his age group back where he had come from. On this fateful enrollment day, he was accompanied by his father and his teacher. Chapter 1635. As Yi Zichen was lining up, he saw the 300 mechas in the sky, and for a child like him who hadn't even turned 12 yet, that was a truly stunning sight. His confidence in this decision skyrocketed as a result. He then saw the mechas flying away from the academy, following which he heard a name that he had been hearing throughout his young life thus far, Shrek Academy. Only then was he made aware that the past #1 academy on the continent had reopened, and it seems that the Spirit Academy he was enrolling at was a direct competitor to Shrek Academy. He then heard that authoritative declaration: the airspace of Shrek Academy is not to be encroached upon. After that, everything became extremely chaotic. They couldn't really see the battles taking place in the distance, but there were live broadcasts being played everywhere. Spirit Academy had also rolled out a series of big screens to broadcast the clash between the two powerhouses. Yi Zichen had always been the best where he had come from, and as a result, he had inevitably developed a hint of pride. In his eyes, he was about to reach rank 30 in soul power. Surely he was already a force to be reckoned with in the Soul Master world. However, only after witnessing the breathtaking matches unfolding on the screens did he realize just how powerful soul masters could be, and just how narrow-sighted he had been. Shrek Academy is so powerful. Father, did Spirit Academy lose? Yi Zichen asked. Yi Zichen's father replied with a wry smile. I can't tell. I'm just a manual laborer. I don't know anything about soul masters. What do you think? Teacher Lee. Teacher Lee was a middle-aged man, and his eyes were practically glowing as he sighed. Shrek Academy is still Shrek Academy. Even the recently rebuilt Shrek Academy is already this powerful. Never did I think that I would get to witness such a titanic clash. It's a pity that the final match didn't happen, but it's further testament to Shrek Academy's dominance that they were able to scare the spirit Pagoda into retreat. There are 5 limit Douluo among their ranks. Yi Zichen's father asked. Are limit Douluo the most powerful soul masters? Teacher Lee replied with a wry smile. Limit Douluo can instantly raise an entire city to the ground with the simplest of gestures. What do you think? To be honest, I'm beginning to regret our decision now. Perhaps we should consider enrolling Zichen to Shrek Academy. Many of the people lining up have already gone over to Shrek Academy. It seems like their foundation and tradition weren't wiped away by that explosion. Yi Zichen's father hesitated momentarily before replying. Let's stay here. Spirit Academy is offering so many benefits, and surely there can't be that big a disparity between the 2 academies. I can't earn enough money to support Zichen's cultivation, so I'll have to enroll him into an academy that can provide the resources in my stead. Teacher Lee nodded with a full-on expression. I guess we have no choice. In any case, Zichen is a truly exceptional young talent. I'm sure he'll be a brilliant soul master regardless of whether he attends Shrek Academy or Spirit Academy. It's just that Shrek Academy is a truly sacred place in the hearts of all of us soul masters. Shortly thereafter, they finally reached the front of the line. Teacher Lee and Yi Zichen's father accompanied Yi Zichen toward a young man, who said, "Give me your hand." Yi Zichen did as he was told, and the young man gently laid a few fingers onto the boy's wrist, upon which a hint of surprise appeared on his face. Not bad at all. You can go in there for further examinations. He pointed over at a vortex door of light as he spoke. Yi Zichen was appraising the young man before him with curiosity in his eyes. This young man appeared to be in his 20s, and was quite handsome in appearance. Are you a soul master as well, big brother? What rank are you? Yi Zichen asked. As a brilliant prodigy, Yi Zichen was very keen to compete with others, and he had always felt that he should always be the best no matter where he was. The young man smiled, and replied, I'm a soul Douluo. Yi Zichen's eyes immediately widened with shock. A soul Douluo? No way. The young man chuckled. I wouldn't lie about something like this. If you continue to work hard, you can do it as well. A series of soul rings emerged around him as he spoke, and there was no powerful aura being released, but those were indeed 8 soul rings, and what was even more alarming was that the final soul ring in that sequence of 8 was a red one. That's a 100,000-year-old soul ring. Teacher Lee exclaimed. The soul rings faded, and the young man made an inviting hand gesture toward the door of light. Teacher Lee hurriedly extended a respectful salute toward the young man. He was only a soul ancestor, so he was vastly inferior to this young soul Douluo. Yi Zichen still wanted to ask more questions, but Teacher Lee quickly dragged him away toward the door of light. Spirit Pagoda truly was formidable. Even a member of the enrollment staff was a soul Douluo, and he had a 100,000-year-old soul spirit. It seemed that they had made the right decision after all. After stepping into the door of light, the surrounding space warped drastically, and Yi Zichen was so frightened that he wanted to cry out, but found himself unable to find his own voice. Thankfully, this process only lasted a short time, and in the next instant, they arrived in an independent space. This was a rather barren place with some very ordinary-looking buildings nearby that were constructed from wood and straw. There was a group of people lining up in front of a short fence, and Yi Zichen wanted to move, but found himself unable to do so. In the next instant, he was abruptly teleported near the front of the line. At the front of the line stood a table, behind which sat an elderly man with a lazy expression. To put it euphemistically, the elderly man's attire was quite plain and simple. No matter how one looked at him, he seemed to be an old farmer. He wasn't even as well dressed as Yi Zichen's father. A young boy arrived at the table, and the elderly man said, "The registration fee is 10 golden soul coins. Put them in that box over there." Yi Zichen's father and teacher both faltered slightly upon hearing this. Who uses soul coins nowadays? Everyone was using federal credits. The young boy's father hurriedly pulled out 10 golden soul coins, which he placed into a box constructed from a few wooden planks. "Give me your hand." The young boy did as he was told, and the elderly man held his hand for a moment before shaking his head. "You're too old. You can go now." The young boy faltered slightly before turning to his father. His father hurriedly put on a fawning smile and said, "My son has only just had his 13th birthday. Would you be able to make an exception for him?" The elderly man waved an impatient hand as if he was swatting away a pesky fly. "Don't delay everyone else. Don't you know the rules of the academy? We only take children below 13 years of age, so you can go now." "Then what about our registration fee?" the father asked. "No returns." The elderly man replied in a harsh manner. The young boy's father couldn't help but flare up with rage. "This is a blatant scam. Return our registration fee or we're not leaving. If we had known that the so-called Shrek Academy was the base for a scam, we wouldn't have come here." The elderly man took a glance at him, then turned to a nearby young man. "Mobai, there's someone causing trouble here." The young man immediately stepped forward. "Defeat me, and you can have your registration fee back." This was a golden-haired young man with an imposing stature and aura. Strangely enough, his pupils were different from one another. He seemed to be only 13 to 14 years of age, but Yi Zichen was struck by a clear sense of inferiority at the sight of him. The young man wasted no time with words and immediately released 3 soul rings, 2 of which were yellow while the final one was purple. The father's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and he could only lament his ill fortune as he hurriedly departed with his son. After that, the young man sat back down again before appraising the rest of the registrants with a clear thread in his eyes. A 3-ring soul elder was far too powerful for the average person to contend with, and he was looking like a hired bug. Chapter 1636. Following that interlude, the line was immediately reduced by as much as a third. After all, no one wanted to spend money for nothing, especially when this place was looking so shabby. Another young boy arrived before the elderly man with his parents, and his mother placed 10 gold coins into the wooden box in a confident manner, while the young boy obediently offered his hand to the elderly man. The elderly man held his hand for a moment, then said, "You're right at 12 years of age. Release your martial soul." The young boy nodded, and faint green soul power was released out of his body alongside a yellow soul ring. His martial soul also appeared alongside the 100-year-old soul ring, and it was a thick vine that wound itself around his body. This was clearly a plant system martial soul. The elderly man shook his head upon seeing this. "He doesn't qualify. You can go now." The confident expressions on the faces of the young boy's parents immediately stiffened upon hearing this, and the boy's mother asked, "Why? My son has always excelled in his elementary academy. Don't you see that he has a 100-year-old soul ring? There aren't many soul masters with such a soul ring at his age." The elderly man replied, "That is indeed a 100-year-old soul ring, but he's only an ordinary person." The father's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. "I don't understand what you mean." The elderly man stood up in an impatient manner before declaring to everyone in the line, "All of you should have done your homework before enrolling at Shrek Academy. Otherwise, you're just wasting your money. Don't you know the meaning behind the name of our Shrek Academy?" Most of the registrants looked on with befuddled expressions. The elderly man explained, "Shrek is a type of monstrous existence even among soul beasts. The reason why we've named our academy as such is because this is an academy of monsters, which means that we only accept monsters, not ordinary people. Those who are over 13 years of age or have yet to exceed rank 21 in soul power can leave now." Yi Zichen's father still had no idea what was happening, but Yi Zichen and Teacher Lee both felt a shiver run down their spines. The old man was declaring this place to be Shrek Academy, but why was Shrek Academy so run down and dilapidated? What exactly was this place? They were unable to speak and could only spectate, while the elderly man seemed to be completely oblivious to their presence. Right at this moment, bright red light erupted from the elderly man's body, and a long staff that was riddled with countless fine patterns appeared in his right hand. Even more astonishingly, 6 soul rings had emerged from beneath his feet, comprised of 1 white, 1 yellow, 3 purples, and 1 black. This old man had the appearance of an ordinary farmer, but he was a soul emperor. Even in the entire kingdom, there were very few soul masters of his caliber. The elderly man slammed the end of his staff onto the ground, and a dull thump rang out as everyone stumbled slightly. He then waved a dismissive hand toward the dumbstruck family of 3. "Next." Just as the elderly man had said, 12-year-old soul grandmasters really were monsters, and in the blink of an eye, only around a dozen registrants were left in the line. The elderly man didn't seem to be fazed in the slightest by the sharp decline in the number of registrants, and he merely continued his work. Those who remained were clearly all quite confident that they satisfied the elderly man's criteria, and sure enough, all of the next few registrants were soul grandmasters of the correct age. After issuing 10 gold coins each, the elderly man told them that they had passed and were eligible to undergo the academy's second round of examination, where they couldn't be accompanied by their parents. This academy seems to be quite interesting. That teacher was so badass when he said the academy only accepted monsters, not ordinary people. A pleasant voice suddenly attracted Yi Zichen's attention, and he turned to discover a beautiful girl with a pair of bright eyes. She appeared to be around the same age as him, and her hair was arranged into a long ponytail. She was speaking to a young boy beside her who wasn't particularly handsome, but gave off a special disposition. "You don't have any further doubts about our teacher's instructions now, do you? This Shrek Academy is definitely no ordinary place, the young boy replied. The golden-haired soul elder from before had also caught sight of them, and a faint smile appeared on his face before he pointed at the elderly man, then splayed his hands open and put on a resigned expression, as if to tell them that he wouldn't be able to help them in their enrollment. Yi Zichen immediately realized that they knew one another. All of a sudden, Yi Zichen's attention was drawn back to the elderly man as he let loose a faint cry of surprise. He was currently holding the hand of a young girl with a bewildered expression. The young girl wasn't accompanied by her parents, and she wore a plain white dress. Her short hair trailed down to just below her ears, and she was slightly taller than the girl with the long ponytail. She had her back facing Yi Zichen, so he was unable to see her appearance, but it was apparent from the nape of her neck that she had very fair and delicate skin. Have I passed the initial examination? The young girl's voice was very gentle and pleasing to the ears. The surprise on the elderly man's face gradually faded, and his brows furrowed slightly as he asked, "Does your family know that you've come here?" Instead of answering his question, the girl smiled as she replied, "Why does that matter? I satisfy your criteria, so you have no reason not to accept me, right?" The elderly man seemed to hesitate momentarily before waving a hand toward the young soul elder. "Take her inside." The slightly peculiar look in the young boy's eyes faded upon hearing this, and he calmly led the girl into the academy. The rest of the students quickly passed the first examination, and finally, the young boy and girl who had been chatting earlier arrived at the front of the line. At this point, the young soul elder had also returned to the elderly man's side. Yi Zichen suddenly discovered that the young soul elder was staring blankly at the back of the line, as if he was seeing something incredible. The girl with the ponytail and the boy beside her reflexively turned around, and they were also rather taken aback by the sight that greeted them. There was only one student left behind them, and she seemed to have arrived only recently. She appeared to be even younger than the girl with the ponytail, and she was roughly the same height as the girl in the white dress from before. She had a head of long black hair, and her skin was also quite fair. But what was most noteworthy about her was her extremely voluptuous figure that completely belied her age. If her face were concealed, she could be easily misidentified as a young woman, and in particular, her voluminous chest was especially attention-grabbing. The young girl currently wore a cold look on her face, and her black eyes were completely devoid of exuberance, creating a stark contrast with her beautiful appearance. She had a set of long and slender limbs with her arms naturally hanging down by her sides, and the aura of deathly coldness she was giving off was very disconcerting. "Are you two here to register or not? If not, then get out of the way." The young boy and girl immediately returned to their senses upon hearing the elderly man's voice, and they hurriedly made their way over to the table. "We're registering together," the young boy said as he placed 20 gold soul coins into the wooden box, then extended a hand alongside the young girl. The elderly man held the girl's hand for a moment before giving a nod of approval. "You're at the right age." However, a hint of bewilderment appeared in his eyes as he switched to the young boy's hand. He then tried to gauge the boy's age a few more times, but to no avail. Finally, he raised his head to look up at the boy and asked, "Have you practiced some type of soul technique with your hands?" The young boy nodded in response. The elderly man's brows furrowed slightly as he instructed, "Lift your leg up." Chapter 1637. The young boy did as he was told, placing his calf onto the table, and the elderly man gently squeezed his calf through the leg of his pants before giving a slight nod. "Your muscular development is quite good, and you're also of the right bone age. Release your martial souls." The boy and girl exchanged a glance, and blue and red light erupted from their bodies alongside a pair of 100-year-old soul rings for each of them. A pair of rabbit ears sprouted out of the young girl's head, and her body quickly became longer and more slender, while tufts of white fur appeared on her hands. As for the young boy, the most ordinary blue silver grass had emerged over his palm, and with his injection of soul power, it quickly transformed into a thick vine. The elderly man only took a casual glance at Xiao Wu before turning to Tang San. "How were you able to cultivate blue silver grass so quickly?" Tang San smiled and replied, "You only accept monsters here, right? Do I qualify as a monster?" A rare smile appeared on the elderly man's face. "You really are a little monster. Mobai, take them in." Everything suddenly stood still here as a series of shimmering golden names appeared above the heads of the young boys and girls present. The names above the young boy and girl who had just passed the examination were Tang San and Xiao Wu, respectively, while the name Dai Mobai appeared above the young soul elder. As for the young woman behind Tang San and Xiao Wu, she was none other than Zhu King. These are members of the first generation of Shrek's 7 monsters. The same thought occurred to Yi Zichen and teacher Li in unison, who hadn't heard of the legend of Shrek Academy and Tang San. Could it be that this was a flashback of when Shrek Academy had been first founded? All of a sudden, the entire surrounding area began to warp, and a new image was presented. Once again, they saw Tang San, Xiao Wu, Dai Mobai, Zhu King, the young girl who had been lined up ahead of Tang San and Xiao Wu, and a young boy with thick facial hair. All of them were jogging with labored expressions, and a chubby young boy was bringing up the rear with a gloomy look on his face. It was quite obvious to Yi Zichen that this was the first generation of Shrek's 7 monsters. Evil Eye White Tiger Dai Mobai, Big Sausage Uncle Oscar, Thousand Hand Douluo Tang San, Evil Fire Phoenix Ma Hongjin, 7 Treasures Glazed in Ronggong, and Hell Civet Zhu King. Even teacher Li was struggling to contain himself at the sight of those legendary groups, let alone Yi Zichen. One scene transitioned into another, presenting a sequence of captivating stories during which these 7 became more and more powerful with each passing day. They watched the 7 of them participate in that fateful competition, defeating one formidable foe after another through their teamwork before finally reaching the grand final. Even against opponents far more powerful than themselves, they never gave up, and through their immense willpower, they defeated the Spirit Hall team, securing the final championship title. And it was also during this match that Xiao Wu's identity was finally revealed. Finally, the images drew to a conclusion on the scene where Tang San and Xiao Wu defeated Bibi Dong and Chen Ringshu in a clash between gods. At this point, Yi Zichen had already shed countless tears. He could never forget the scene where Xiao Wu had sacrificed herself for Tang San, nor everything that Tang San had done to revive her. In the end, Yi Zichen's trio appeared in a spacious hall, and a man slowly emerged into the hall to face them. The tradition of Shrek Academy was built up through the efforts of countless generations. The glory of Shrek Academy that has stood for 20,000 years needs generation upon generation of little monsters like yourself to uphold. Yi Zichen, if you're willing to become a member of Shrek Academy, then proceed with courage to the rest of the examination. "I want to become a member of Shrek Academy." Yi Zichen yelled with all his might, and only then did he discover that he was able to move and speak again. The figure ahead of him gradually became clearer, revealing a handsome smiling man with a head of long blue hair and a golden trident in his grasp. He raised his trident and pointed it at a door of light behind him. "That is the path to Shrek Academy and the path to your dreams. Step onto that path with all of your willpower, courage, and determination. I wish you the best of luck. Thank you, Senior Tang San." Yi Zichen bowed to the point where his head was almost touching his knees. Not only had those scenes shown him just how powerful the first generation of Shrek's 7 monsters had been, it had shown him the process of their growth and their fearless, self-sacrificing spirit. No young boy could resist such rousing scenes, and in that moment, Yi Zichen was determined to become a member of Shrek Academy no matter what, and make his own contribution to uphold the glory of Shrek Academy. Thus, the 3 of them strode into the door of light and vanished from the hall. Tang San looked on at their departing figures, and murmured to himself, "The current generation of kids really are quite exceptional." His body then flickered and warped, and as it became clear again, he had transformed into none other than old Demon Scourge. Never had there been 2 identical enrollment examinations for Shrek Academy throughout history. There were always alterations made to the events from year to year. As such, no one could guess what the examination would entail. It was exactly due to the emergence of people like Bloodlust, Douluo, Yantianheng that Shrek Academy was paying attention not just to students' aptitude and powers, but also to their personality. It was very important for one to possess strong willpower and a kind heart, not just for cultivation, but also for being a good person in general. This was how Shrek Academy had been able to uphold its tradition for so many years, and why so many powerful beings were willing to lend Shrek Academy their assistance during its time of need. Those responsible for overseeing the enrollment examinations included inner court disciples and new teachers. This was the first enrollment since the Academy's reconstruction, and everyone was getting involved. Following the Academy's reconstruction, some alumni had been invited back to become teachers, and after a selection process, the current Shrek Academy now had a total of 51 teachers, including 19 inner court teachers. In addition to that, there were also 46 teacher aides. One had to realize that it had always been extremely difficult to become an official teacher of the Academy, and that tradition would continue to be maintained. The outer court principal was Wu Zhangkong, while the inner court principal was Lon Yeyu, and Lan Muzi and Tang Yinmeng were the the vice principals. The entire structure of the academy was already complete, but it would not be an easy task for it to return to its former glory. Tang Wolin was also one of the 51 teachers, and he was teaching in the blacksmith division of the academy. As a divine blacksmith, there was no better candidate than him for the role. In particular, the clash that had just taken place against Spirit Academy perfectly reflected just how important a divine blacksmith was. Without his heavenly refinement, it would not be an easy task for Shrek Academy to secure this victory. Limit Douluos were already extremely feared and revered, and the only thing more terrifying than a limit Douluo was a limit Douluo with a suit of 4-word battle armor. All of Shrek's 7 monsters already possessed pieces of 4-word battle armor. Who was to say that the other limit Douluos of Shrek Academy didn't have full suits of 4-word battle armor? Kaiyangyu Dongfang had chosen to retreat without any hesitation, as his main concern was that they would have to face potentially 5 limit Douluo with suits of 4-word battle armor. Throw the 2 limit Douluo of the Tang sect into the mix, and Shrek Academy would truly be an incomparably formidable force. In fact, their high-end power was even superior back before Shrek Academy was destroyed. Overall, the past Shrek Academy had been the most powerful entity, as it possessed the most titled Douluos and hyper Douluo out of any organization on the entire continent, and it was also led by Yang Ming, the undisputed #1 most powerful being on the continent. Even among quasi-gods, Yang Ming stood at the very pinnacle of the pyramid. Chapter 1638. If it hadn't been for Yang Ming, the power of the 2 Godslayer missiles would have been enough to destroy the entire Shrek Academy sanctuary. Yang Ming had withstood close to half of the explosion's power on his own. If he had chosen to flee at the time, no one would have been able to stop him, but he couldn't do that as he was the Sea God's Pavilion Master and the ultimate guardian of Shrek Academy. It was exactly because the Holy Spirit cult had identified this that they had chosen to unleash such an attack. In doing so, they were placing Yang Ming in a situation where he had no choice but to sacrifice himself. Under those circumstances, it was already a miracle that Yang Ming's soul had been able to survive using his martial soul as a vessel. Wu Zhangkong hadn't participated in the clash against Spirit Academy, as he had to oversee Shrek Academy's enrollment examinations. He was constantly patrolling the examination venues, inspecting all of the data and statistics coming from each stage. Teacher Wu, the statistics for the 8th stage have come out. This new cohort is amazing. Over 60% of them have passed the mental examination. That's much better than our cohort. Luo Gixing said in an incredulous manner as he handed the statistical data in his hand over to Wu Zhangkong. Wu Zhangkong accepted the spreadsheet and nodded in response. There's a reason for that. All of them underwent an important spiritual lesson that bolstered their mental fortitude right before the examinations. Hey! Right at this moment, a burst of bone-chilling cackling rang out, and Luo Gixing was so frightened that he instantly ducked behind Wu Zhangkong. This was a voice that he could never forget, but it was also one that he never wanted to hear again. Old Demon Greed emerged with a benevolent smile before approaching Wu Zhangkong. What do you think of our spiritual lesson? Wu Zhangkong extended a bow toward Old Demon Greed, and even though his expression was quite cold, he replied in a genuine voice. It worked extremely well. I think this should be a part of all of our future enrollment examinations. Through this, we'll be able to bolster the determination of the students to join our Shrek Academy. Old Demon Greed chuckled. I also think it's worked very well. It's not brainwashing, but it can rouse the spirits of these young boys and girls. After all, nothing is more inspiring than witnessing the journey of the first generation of Shrek's 7 monsters. Luo Gixing couldn't help but ask, Senior Greed, why didn't we receive this treatment on the demonic island? This isn't fair. Even now, he couldn't help but shudder as he recalled back to those traumatic experiences. He could clearly recall that he had been transformed into a woman before being locked up together with Shu Yucheng, following which a strong aphrodisiac had been released upon both of them. Even though that had only been an illusion, he still wanted to die every time he recalled that ordeal. However, he had to admit that he had matured significantly following that experience. At the very least, his mental fortitude had improved, and he was plagued by far fewer negative emotions. Having said that, if he had the choice, he would rather sacrifice those benefits than go through that ordeal. Even now, he and Shu Yucheng very rarely spoke to one another, and their relationship was extremely awkward. In contrast, everyone else's situation was slightly better than theirs. At the time, their group had been comprised of Luo Gixing, Shu Yucheng, Wu Siduo, Yang Niangshan, Zheng Yuren, and 2 other students. The most fortunate of the bunch were Yang Niangshan and Zheng Yuren, who developed feelings for one another on the demonic island and finally became a couple. Of course, it wasn't all positives for them, either. For example, Zheng Yuren was extremely restrictive toward Yang Niangsha, and Yang Niangsha didn't dare to resist in fear of being poisoned by Zheng Yuren. Zheng Yuren was truly a force to be reckoned with in their cohort, and as her cultivation rank progressed, so had the lethality of her poison. Old Demon Greed turned to Luo Gixing and said, how can you compare yourself with them? You had already cultivated in the academy for so many years. Of course we had to use more extreme methods. You don't need to be inspired, you need to be polished. Thinking back, you were really fun to polish back then, and you looked quite good as a woman. You had nice, fair skin, and that scream of yours, tisk tisk. That's enough. Luo Gixing yelled before fleeing the scene. The old demons had blackmail material even on Long Yeyu, let alone Luo Gixing. Old Demon Greed looked on at the fleeing Luo Gixing as he shook his head in disapproval. His mental fortitude requires more development. He needs to be able to remain calm under all circumstances. Let me think about how your experience was. Little Zhangkong, I still need to oversee the examinations. Senior, farewell. Wu Zhangkong had already vanished into a cloud of icy mist as he spoke. Old Demon Greed chuckled before making his way casually into the academy while murmuring to himself. Being back at the academy really is a fantastic feeling. Even though this is no longer the Shrek Academy of the past, at least we won't be lonely here. At Spirit Academy. Shishi cast his gaze all the way to the back of the line in front of Spirit Academy, then turned to Yue Yu. We've done enough, right? We should leave some for Spirit Academy. Maybe there are still some bright young talents left. Yue Yu rolled his eyes in response. How shameless can you be? There are only 5 people left, and you're saying that now? Shishi counted. Then what do you say we should do? Yue Yu replied in a justified manner. Of course we go through these 5 as well. Why would we leave Spirit Academy with any opportunities? Shishi grumbled. You're even more shameless than I am. Having said that, I fully agree. Thus, the 2 of them joyfully examined the last 5 registrants, and there really was a little girl who fit their criteria and was sent into the Door of Light. We're done now, Senior, Yue Yu said as he extended a respectful bow toward the Door of Light. The seductive old demon lust emerged from the Door of Light before making an inviting hand gesture. He. Then you guys come in as well, and we'll get out of here. Shishi and Yue Yu exchanged a glance, and they gritted their teeth before making their way into the Door of Light as if they were walking to their own executions. Old Demon Sloth suddenly emerged out of thin air, then waved a hand toward the banner they had set up, and the banner that had stood in front of Spirit Academy the entire day abruptly vanished alongside that Door of Light. In a silent chamber in Spirit Academy, Pantani was just about to go into meditation when his eyes suddenly sprang open, and a hint of astonishment appeared on his face as he exclaimed, "Why are there such powerful spiritual fluctuations at the front gate?" He immediately directed his spiritual power toward that direction, but didn't discover anything. How strange! Where could those spiritual fluctuations have come from? Pantani was none other than the elderly man with the brain martial soul, and as a result, he possessed immense spiritual power. In the principal's office, how has enrollment been going? Kaiyangyu Dongfang asked. Kaiyangyu's Hanging replied, the statistics haven't been brought to me yet, but it looks like we managed to enroll more students in total than Shrek Academy. Even though many registrants left at the end, we should still be ahead on the total number. Kaiyangyu Dongfang nodded in response. This wasn't exactly a resounding success, but we did manage to enroll a lot of students. I don't understand how Shrek Academy was able to gather so many powerful beings in such a short time. This is going to be quite an issue in the future as well. Chapter 1639. Kaiyangyu's Hanging's brows furrowed slightly as he speculated. Could it be that those are allies they only temporarily recruited? Otherwise, how could we know nothing about them? Kaiyangyu Dongfang replied, I've already launched an investigation, so let's wait for the outcome. With the resources of our Spirit Pagoda, we'll definitely be able to find something as long as we get the slightest of leads. You don't need to pay any attention to that. Focus on enrollment and nurturing the academy students. The most important factor that decides the caliber of an academy are the students it produces. I'm sure we won't be inferior in this aspect to a newly rebuilt Shrek Academy. You can rest assured, grandfather. Kyangyu's Hangting said with brimming confidence. We have so many resources that are unavailable to them. There's no way we can fail. Right at this moment, a burst of urgent door knocking suddenly rang out. Kyangyu's Hangting's brows furrowed slightly as he said, "Come in." A middle-aged man barged into the room with a panicked expression and said, "Bad news, principal." Kyangyu's Hangting's heart jolted upon hearing this, and he urged, "Calm down and explain." The middle-aged man took a moment to catch his breath, then elaborated, "We've just tallied up all of the statistics for this enrollment, and we discovered that not even a single one of our enrolled students are above rank 20 in soul power. Children with soul power above rank 20 at below 12 years of age are very rare, but not non-existent. This has always been Shrek Academy's enrollment criteria. Hence, we grew suspicious and asked some of the students what had happened, and they told us that some registrants had already been taken elsewhere after the preliminary examination." "What preliminary examination is this?" Kyangyu's Hangting faltered slightly upon hearing this. The middle-aged man replied, "That's what I want to know as well. All of our examinations took place inside the academy, but the students say that they all underwent a preliminary examination while lining up outside the front gate, and that those who passed the preliminary examination were asked to enter a vortex door of light, while those who didn't pass the preliminary examination were allowed into the academy." Kyangyu's Hangting almost fainted from fury upon hearing this. How is this possible? Are all of our enrollment staff blind? How could they not have seen anything? The middle-aged man was already on the verge of bursting into tears. "I don't know. We've already checked through the security footage, and the only suspicious activity that we saw was that all of the students would extend a hand forward after arriving at the gate, and after that, some of them walked away to the side before disappearing into thin air. For some reason, none of us noticed this." Kyangyu's Hangting was about to say something further, but he was cut off by Kyangyu Dongfang. "Let's go and take a look at the security footage first." Half an hour later, Kyangyu Hangting and Kyangyu Dongfang were standing in front of a large screen that was displaying the security footage with dark expressions. Sure enough, one registrant after another was making their way toward the front gate before pausing and extending a hand forward. Some of them then walked over to the side before abruptly vanishing, while others continued into the academy, and none of the enrollment staff seemed to have seen anything. What the hell is going on? Can somebody tell me what happened? Kyangyu's Hangting was about to pull his own hair out by the roots. All of the employees were completely petrified. They were all low-level workers, and in the spirit academy that was filled with powerful beings, they could easily be killed and no one would ever know. They're not to be blamed. Principal, this is the result of an extremely powerful illusion. A short while ago, I detected a burst of powerful spiritual fluctuations, but when I tried to latch onto it, it was already gone. During the time that this illusion was in effect, I just so happened to be over at Shrek Academy. Hantanyi said with tightly furrowed brows. Kyangyu Dongfang asked, "An illusion? How could there be such a powerful illusion? What kind of soul master could pull off something like this?" Hantanyi shook his head in response. "I'm not sure. Theoretically speaking, I should be able to directly sense all illusions within a radius of 10 kilometers. However, I was only made aware of this illusion as it was being withdrawn. Thinking back now, I was only able to sense the spiritual fluctuations as it had overlapped for an instant with the spatial fluctuations that resulted from the withdrawal of the illusion. Unless there are some other circumstances involved, the creator of the illusion should possess spiritual power that's not inferior to my own. Otherwise, I wouldn't have discovered it so late." Kyangyu Dongfang drew a sharp breath upon hearing this. Hantanyi was the undisputed number one when it came to spiritual power on the entire continent. If Shrek Academy really did have a soul master with spiritual power that wasn't inferior to Hantanyi's, then that would be a truly terrifying prospect. This was only a recently rebuilt Shrek Academy. How had it accumulated so much in such a short time? Even more importantly, all of the most exceptional students had been taken away by Shrek Academy right in front of the Spirit Pagoda's very own academy. Even Kyangyu Dongfang was struggling to contain his fury now. The clash between Shrek Academy and Spirit Academy had taken quite a long time, and even though it had ended in defeat for Spirit Academy, he had thought that with the time they had bought, Spirit Academy would have surely been able to enroll many students already. However, never did he think that he would be playing right into Shrek Academy's hands from the very beginning. Where the hell did these people come from? Since when was there a master of illusions in Shrek Academy? Kyangyu Dongfang was on the verge of throwing up blood at this point. If the higher-ups of the Spirit Pagoda would hear about this, the entire Kyangyu family would most likely be heavily impacted. A massive amount of manpower and resources had been expended to found Spirit Academy, so failure wasn't an option. What should we do, grandfather? Kyangyu's Hangting was at a complete loss. Kyangyu Dongfang quickly repressed his tumultuous emotions and replied, "Keep this information strictly confidential and impose a non-disclosure order on all those who know about this. If anyone dares to leak this information, then don't blame me for silencing them." All of the surrounding employees were unconsciously holding their breath in the face of Kyangyu Dongfang's furious aura. Kyangyu's Hangting immediately understood his grandfather's intentions. They definitely couldn't allow the higher-ups of the Spirit Pagoda, particularly the core members, to hear about this. Otherwise, the Kyangyu family would be placed under immense pressure. As such, even though they had been screwed over, they could only swallow this bitter pill in silence. Kyangyu's Hangting snapped. "Shrek Academy is absolutely shameless. How could they do something like this?" Kyangyu Dongfang took a cold glance at him and said, "At the very least, we haven't lost to them on numbers. Nurture this cohort of students to the best of your abilities. I'm sure they won't be this lucky next year." Despite Kyangyu Dongfang's fierce demeanor, Kyangyu's Hangting could tell that his grandfather had truly been shaken and was even slightly fearful of Shrek Academy's 5-limit Douluo. In terms of top-grade firepower, the Spirit Pagoda no longer held any advantage. Chapter 1640. In terms of top-tier power, the current Shrek Academy was superior even to the Shrek Academy of Yanming's generation. Those were 5-limit Douluos, and all of them were very likely to be four-word battle armor masters. In the face of such an almighty Shrek Academy, they could no longer use a lot of the blatant targeting tactics they had originally planned. Furthermore, they knew that news of what had happened would quickly spread across the entire continent, and that the fact that Shrek Academy possessed 5-limit Douluo and a divine blacksmith would undoubtedly create massive stirs. Throw the 2-limit Douluo of the Tang sect into the mix, and the Tang sect and Shrek Academy's overall power was no longer inferior to what it had been prior to the bombing. Unless another Godslayer missile could be deployed, there would be no way to bring down the current Shrek Academy. Alternatively, perhaps the Holy Spirit cult would also be capable of destroying Shrek Academy if it were to re-emerge in full force. Under these circumstances, the Spirit Pagoda didn't even dare to restrict Shrek Academy students from obtaining soul spirits. Otherwise, they would essentially be giving Shrek Academy an excuse to demolish the Spirit Pagoda's branches. After all, Tang Wulian had already destroyed a Spirit Pagoda branch in the Dou Spirit Empire. Taking all of this into consideration, it was truly going to be very difficult to target Shrek Academy. The only difference compared to the past was that Shrek Academy would most likely require a very long time to return to its former glory. However, regardless of whether they were willing to admit it or not, Shrek Academy had truly risen once again. Cheers. In the teachers' cafeteria of Shrek Academy, Tang Wulian, the 5-limit Douluo, all of the members of the Sea Gods Pavilion, all of the Academy's teachers, and the students that had survived the bombing had all raised their wine glasses with excitement in their eyes. Enrollment had concluded, and a total of 321 registrants had satisfied Shrek Academy's basic enrollment criteria, while 117 ultimately managed to pass all of the examinations. This was an extremely rare number even in the entire history of Shrek Academy. Indeed, Shrek Academy had broadened its enrollment policy slightly, but that was only in terms of numbers, not in terms of the difficulty of the examinations. After witnessing the rousing illusions created by the 7 old demons, the pass rate had exceeded 30%, which was extraordinarily high. In the past, even a pass rate of 10% had been considered to be quite good. These 117 students were Shrek Academy's first new cohort since its rebuild, and they also formed the basis for Shrek Academy's resurgence. The quality of this batch of students was very high, and there was no lack of prodigies among them. In reality, there had never been a shortage of prodigies in this world, and Shrek Academy's forte lied in its ability to maximize the talent of brilliant prodigies. All of the efforts they had expended had finally bore fruit. This cohort of new students was valuable beyond any measure of quantifiable scale, and they were currently all living in the Academy's New Boyne area. As a safety precaution against potential revenge operations from the Spirit Pagoda, even the super solar ray defense system was activated at all times. This celebratory banquet wasn't all that lavish, but everyone was brimming with excitement. Just as Kyangyu's Hangting had realized, following today's enrollment, Shrek Academy had finally re-established itself, and it could be said that this was the Academy's first step to success. Even though there was still a very long journey ahead, they had at least taken the first step on that lengthy journey. The display of 5-limit Douluos told everyone that Shrek Academy was not to be looked down on, and the divine grade mecha that had been struck out of the sky told everyone that Shrek Academy Academy was not to be encroached upon. From now on, anyone who wanted to target Shrek Academy would have to think long and hard about whether they were actually going to be shooting themselves in the foot. The main table was very large, and Tang Wuling sat at the main seat with the 5-limit Douluo closest to him, followed by the members of the Sea Gods Pavilion. Tang Wuling raised his glass and offered toasts of gratitude to everyone present. After making a round through the entire cafeteria, his face had become slightly flushed. He turned to Long Yeyu and said, "Give us a speech, Elder Long." In her youthful form, Long Yeyu was truly a stunning beauty, but her eyes were still as jaded as ever. Successful enrollment is only the first step to success, but we've taken a very solid step. The establishment of the 7 Saint Paradise is undoubtedly going to be immensely beneficial to our Shrek Academy, and we must continue to work closely with the 7 seniors of the 7 Saint Paradise to better nurture our students, particularly when it comes to educating their characters. Power in the wrong hands can be extremely dangerous, so if we're producing students with bad character, we'll be endangering the continent rather than benefiting society. I thank everyone for your hard work, particularly Wuling. Truth be told, all of us hesitated in making the decision to appoint you as the Sea Gods Pavilion Master. You were simply far too young, but under those circumstances at the time, we had no choice. I didn't even know how much longer I was going to be able to live, so I could only pass down the future of Shrek Academy to the younger generation. I noticed how heavy a burden that is, but you didn't disappoint us. Even though we've been constantly assisting, your efforts have been pivotal to reviving the Tree of Life and taking Shrek Academy to where it is today. As such, there's something that I must say here, and I'm sure everyone will agree when I say this. You are truly deserving of the title of Sea Gods Pavilion Master. Tang Wuling was trembling slightly as he listened to Elder Long's address, and tears began to well up in his eyes. He knew that he shouldn't be shedding tears as the Sea Gods Pavilion Master, but he was unable to repress his own emotions. These past few years had been so hard for him. All of the good days had completely vanished in the wake of the bombing, and he had been forced to shoulder an enormous, crushing responsibility. After that, he had witnessed the death of his foster parents, and he had been constantly battling powerful enemies, both out in the open, as well as in the shadows. These days had allowed him to make rapid progress, transforming into the vastly renowned Tang Sect Master and Sea Gods Pavilion Master from the largely unknown leader of Shrek's 7 monsters that he had once been. He was like the main character of an inspiring legend, but how much pain and suffering had he been forced to endure to reach this point? Each and every step that he had taken during these past few years had been accompanied by agony and peril, yet he had gritted his teeth and taken all of those grueling steps one after another. He had been maturing just as quickly as his powers had been progressing, but no matter how mature he became, he was still prone to feeling mentally exhausted. He had been dedicating everything he had to Shrek Academy's rebuild, and he had recruited the Yuan family, as well as killing Douluo Tongu. At the same time, he had been engaging in heavenly refinement and contending with elemental tribulation every single day. Who could endure the bombardment of elemental lightning every day? While this did indeed enhance his powers over time, the excruciating agony of feeling like one's body was being pulverized on a molecular level had to be experienced to be understood. However, he had managed to endure all of this. He had become strong enough to face his opponents, but that didn't mean that he was without weakness. Many a night of his was spent in bittersweet reminiscence of the time he had spent with the woman of his dreams. In that instant, his hardy facade was finally shattered by Elder Long's speech, and the emotions came gushing out uncontrollably. "I'm sorry." Tang Wuling stood up and turned around so that his back was facing everyone. He didn't want everyone to see him in this vulnerable state. Yali immediately rose to her feet and gave him a warm embrace. "We know just how much hardship all of you have had to endure, especially you, my child. Your burdens are far too heavy, and they shouldn't have been loaded onto the shoulders of someone so young, but as a result, you've been able to constantly grow and develop. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.